A funny thing happens when you put business leaders together in a room. They talk, they discuss ideas, they trade stories, and they share solutions and solve problems. In a certain way, this is just human nature. However, in business, many times companies and in fact countries remain isolated in their silos. They stay closeted, away, focusing on their own little corner of the earth while the world passes them by. Fortunately, one of the most immediate benefits of a tighter political integration is better business cooperation. We all share similar ideals and face similar problems, so it makes sense that a manufacturer in Thailand has probably solved the same management issue that's stumping a retail chain in Indonesia, and I can guarantee you that a technology company in Singapore has a solution for a startup in Cambodia. This is the power of sharing on a micro level. Now, magnify that across an entire population of ASEAN and begin to see the opportunities ahead. Asian business practices are different than Western ones. We tend to have more strict hierarchies and yet also are more collaborative internally. This is a lesson U.S. business leaders need to learn.
The great strength of East Asia over the last 2 decades was this production sharing network. It allowed East Asia to become fully integrated in the global economy. It's brought its labor force into the global production system. It allowed East Asian countries, both large and small, rich or poor, to be brought into a very efficient way of doing something, and therefore they benefited a lot. Now, did America benefit? America benefited in the sense that the product mix of the things being produced became much cheaper and much better. So consumers in the West benefited a lot. Secondly, the people who finance this, the people who market and distribute this, which is where the real money is being made, most of this were American companies. The Walmarts of the world, the Apples of the world, the Dell Computers of the world. They benefited from this production sharing network because they were in charge of the marketing distribution, and that's where all the profit is. So American companies benefited a lot financially. America has to ask itself, should I be supportive of what kinds of jobs and what kinds of activities with the recognition of what Asia is going to be doing? Because fundamentally, even if they grow at 7 or 8%, their wage structure is going to be lower. Their competitive education, of course, is going to get higher. So the $3 or $4 or $5 or $6, $7, $8, $9 jobs, which they're going to move up to, is theirs. But I wanted $20, $30, $40 jobs. How do I then mesh in with this production sharing network? And the answer here is there is ways to mesh in there. Apple has done it. Intel has done it. Okay? They've been able to preserve that technology. They've been able to capture most of the costs, the benefits, the profits. They've been able to generate lots of high-paying jobs associated with this. That's the kind of model that's a collaboration between the United States and Asia in a realistic sense, which both sides benefit.
If you look at the future, you have to look at the economy's ability of innovation, capability of innovation. And how do you look at it? I think there's 2 criteria. One is patent. The other is research and development. As for international patent application, US is #1 country. Japan is #2. Research and development area. As for private and public, meaning government spending and private company spending, US is #1. Japan is #2 in that account as well. If you have these research and development and patent, I think you have some, you shouldn't be complacent, but you have some sort of track prepared for economic growth in the future. And I think that is exactly what we are on, United States and Japan.
Many of the very avant-garde innovations are not coming from the north anymore, but they come from the south and the east, whether it's stock exchanging, pushing for sustainability through innovative partnership, or whether it's very avant-garde community, large-scale investment outlays done by the private sector. They happen in the south and they're done by southern companies. On the technological front, technology has gone global, truly. I mentioned research and development having migrated away from its traditional clusters. Leading global brands now set up research and development institutes in emerging markets, something unheard of 10 years ago. Research and development used to be the ultimate holy grail that was protected in the domestic market where the company was incorporated initially. But in an era of global interdependence, corporations set up also research and development in places where there's supply of young engineers, where there's a future market, where one needs to understand the trends of the future. And these are indeed fundamental changes. It basically shows the global marketplace has widened. Technology is diffusing much more rapidly. New players that have come up are showing their strength as well. Technological catch-up is the hottest item out there because the established large corporations from the Western world obviously want to maintain their competitive edge. Domestic companies in value chain relationships want to catch up as quickly as possible. That leads to lots of competition, basically a very healthy thing because it continues to bring down costs for everybody, consumers everywhere, and it spurs technological change on a very large scale.
Ingenuity for development of R&D capability. You really need to have good educational systems, free flow of information, and protection of intellectual property rights. And these have always been challenges in emerging markets. Copywriting, copycatting, counterfeiting are always issues. But again, I think in the more mature economies in Asia, and China is a good example of this, we see a much more serious attempt to protect intellectual property rights. We see a much greater emphasis on improving the quality of tertiary education. There's a fantastic education system in China that's only getting better. Students are going overseas to study, but they're also coming back to China when they're finished their education. There's some terrific schools in China. But there are also issues relating to probably transparency, free flow of information that can be improved because people need to have access to unfettered access to information. And so things relating to access to the internet and free flow of information are probably somewhat additional impediments to innovation. But I think all these things are gradually working their way through the system, and we're seeing great strides. And in fact, we're seeing a lot of big multinational businesses moving their R&D capabilities into China right now because of the big educated workforce there.
Because if you look at the politics in the West, the natural instinct of what's going on in East Asia and they're successful is not to say they're doing something good or it's something for us to copy. It's more like they're robbing me. They got cheap labor. They're unfair. They're stealing from me. Now, in some ways, when they say they're stealing from me, they're probably correct. If we're talking about technology, they're saying we produce something, whatever, China doesn't respect intellectual property rights. I produce something very, very good. The Japanese copied it a long time ago. I have a plant produces something very efficiently. What did South Korea do? They actually bought the plant and they reproduced it. Okay. Now, the reality is this is technological change that's been going on forever. In the U.S., its whole industrial process were copied from England and Germany. So if you go back in history books 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people will accuse the United States of intellectual property rights thefts, stealing technology. That's the way the world goes. Sometimes it's more egregious, sometimes it's more legalistic, whatever is going to happen. And it happens because as long as there is a gap between the rich and the poor countries will try to use technologies and processes which are productive, found in the West. And if they're successful, and some of them are, they get very close to what I would call the same technology level as the West, then they have to invent it themselves. And sooner or later, China, or right now South Korea, Taiwan, they have to do this. And it's happening. So the Samsungs of the world are becoming as productive technology sense as American companies. They have to start creating it themselves. So that's the only solution in the end.
Asia's in a really, really good place for the next explosion of growth. Whereas in Europe and America, all these markets are so well regulated and they've been established. It's very hard to change the rules. It's very hard to, allow for new companies to come up, innovation. And in Asia, it's all about innovation. Everywhere you go, people are entrepreneurial, they're creative in their thinking. They're finding ways to make life better, and from small things. In Asia, you see the concepts of the restaurants and the things when Asians do it, they go all crazy. The full theme, the full concept, it's done very, very well. And even in the United States, you have a very homogenized product across the entire country. McDonald's in LA, McDonald's in New York, not so different. McDonald's in Bangkok and McDonald's in Tokyo, it's like going to a whole new restaurant, like the whole concept, everything, It's every time you cross a border, you feel the differences. And this is what's great, is that we are bound together by being in the same region, and now we're going to cooperate together by having less regulation when it comes to labor, so that people and goods can move more freely. So I think that this is the best. And we won't share a currency, so why not?